A single, blood-curdling shriek ripped through the otherwise perfect summer symphony of Lake Harmony. Laughter died in throats. Barbecue tongs clattered onto picnic tables. Every head snapped towards the shimmering, indifferent blue of the water. There, out past the brightly colored buoys marking the safe zone, a child's dark hair fanned out on the surface like a tragic flower, arms flailing in a silent, desperate plea. Then she was gone, swallowed by the lake's sudden, greedy depths. A wave of collective horror crashed over the dozens of onlookers. Shouts erupted. "She's drowning! Someone help her!" Fingers pointed. A woman, her face a canvas of disbelief rapidly contorting into agony, screamed a name, Lily, a sound that clawed at every heart. But they remained rooted to the spot, a gallery of frozen figures, their limbs leaden, their minds struggling to process the unfolding nightmare. Each tick of the clock was a nail in a tiny coffin. They watched, paralyzed, as precious seconds bled away. And then a gasp, not of fear this time, but of utter, stupefied disbelief. From the periphery, a man whose lower body ended at the hips. He was heaving himself from his wheelchair, his face a mask of terrifying resolve. Already moving, dragging his powerful torso across the unforgiving ground toward the water, towards the impossible. The very sight defied logic. Yet there he was, a human torpedo of pure will, aimed at the heart of crisis. His name was Marcus O'Connell, Sergeant O'Connell, U.S. Army Rangers, retired. Mac. To the very few who had breached the careful perimeter he'd built around himself since Afghanistan, that it hadn't just taken his legs. It had tried to take his soul. He'd fought back, inch by painful inch, through a hell of surgeries, phantom limb pain that clawed at him nightly, and the crushing weight of a life irrevocably altered. Duke, his old shepherd, a veteran of the same war in his own right, now lay by his abandoned wheelchair, a low whine vibrating in his chest, his intelligent eyes fixed on Mac. This lakeside park was Mac's sanctuary, a place where the ghosts of Hellman Province occasionally loosened their grip, where the distant laughter of children sometimes drowned out the ringing in his ears, a souvenir from that day of fire and blood. He'd been watching a family near the water's edge, a little girl with pigtails, no older than Lily, building a sand castle with her father. A familiar ache had tightened his chest. He remembered another little girl, dark eyes wide with fear, in a dusty village lane, moments before the world exploded. He'd tried to shield her. He often wondered if he'd done enough. If anyone truly could. That question, unanswered, was a stone in his gut, a constant companion to his physical pain. His life now was a testament to controlled force, his upper body honed to a machine-like strength, compensating for what was lost. He moved with a grim efficiency, whether maneuvering his chair or hauling himself through his specially adapted house. But always there was a quiet dignity, the ingrained discipline of a soldier who understood duty, honor, and the fierce, protective instinct that defined the American spirit. He bore his scars, visible and invisible, not as a victim, but as a survivor still searching for his peace. The playful yelp from the water had barely registered over the thrum of his own thoughts. Then the shift, the terror in that first, true scream. It was a sound Mac knew intimately. It bypassed his ears and went straight to his core, igniting circuits long dormant but never severed. His head snapped up, his gaze, the color of glacial ice, swept the water. He saw the overturned pink flamingo, the widening ripples where Lily had vanished. He saw the mother's collapse, the crowd's impotent horror. He didn't think. He reacted. The Ranger creed, never leave a fallen comrade, flashed in his mind, as potent now as it had been on any battlefield. This child, this innocent, was, in this desperate moment, his comrade. A raw, guttural sound, more animal than human, tore from Mac's lungs as he launched himself from the wheelchair. He hit the ground with a bone-jarring thud, the impact shooting up his spine, a familiar jolt he usually tried to avoid. Duke let out a distressed bark, but Mac's sharp, "Stay, Duke! Stay!" rooted the loyal dog to the spot, though every fiber of his being strained to follow. The crowd recoiled. Some averted their eyes, a mixture of shock and perhaps a sudden, shameful awareness of their own immobility. Others stared mesmerized as Mac began his impossible journey. His hands, calloused from years of gripping rims and pulling his own weight, clawed at the manicured grass and the rougher earth beyond. His shoulders, broad and bunched with muscle, worked like monstrous pistons. Scraped knuckles, torn fingernails. He registered the pain distantly, filed it away. The ground sloped downwards, offering a treacherous assistance. He reached the muddy verge of the lake, the sticky, cloying earth sucking at his jeans, at his hands. Tried to anchor him in futility. He fought it, grunting with each colossal effort, his face contorted, sweat already plastering his short dark hair to his forehead. He was a study in brutal efficiency, a man reduced to his most elemental core, will and muscle against indifferent nature. "There! I see her, Bubble," he roared, the command in his voice slicing through the ambient panic like a knife. His eyes, fixed on a faint shimmer on the water's surface some 20 yards out, never wavered. He plunged into shockingly cold water, the sudden immersion stealing his breath for a precious second. The lake bottom was a treacherous slurry of mud and decaying leaves. There was nothing firm to push against, no leverage for a man without legs. He was instantly, terrifyingly aware of how much he relied on the ground, even in his compromised state. Here, the water sought to claim him, to drag him down with the child. Lily's head broke the surface again, a fleeting, heartbreaking sight. Her eyes, wide and unseeing with pure terror, met it for a fraction of a second. A tiny, choked gasp, more water than air, and she was gone again, her small body surrendering to the depths. The mother's wails from the shore intensified, each cry a fresh spur to Mac's already burning urgency. He knew, with a cold certainty that settled deep in his bones, that he had mere seconds. He drove forward, his arms now his sole means of propulsion, his hands scooping and pulling through the dense water, his torso twisting powerfully. It was like trying to swim through wet concrete. The drag of his lower body, unresponsive and heavy, was a terrible anchor. Every inch gained was a victory hard won. His shoulders screamed, a fiery protest that spread down his back and into his biceps. He remembered basic training, the drill sergeant screaming, pushing him beyond what they thought humanly possible. This was worse. This wasn't training. This was for a life. A memory, sharp and unwelcome, pierced through his concentration. The IED's flash, the weightless feeling, then the crushing impact. For a horrifying instant, the murky lake water tasted like Afghan dust and blood. He tasted his own fear, metallic and raw. He fought it back, clamping down on the panic with the iron discipline that had saved his life before. Focus, target, execute. He could hear his old squad leader's voice in his head. He could almost feel the weight of his pack, the reassuring presence of his brothers beside him. But he was alone now, in a different kind of war. The current, invisible but powerful, tugged at him, trying to sweep him past his target. He compensated, angling his body, fighting with a primal fury. His lungs burned, demanding air he couldn't spare. Black spots began to dance at the edges of his vision. He knew the signs of hypoxia. He knew he was pushing his body into a dangerous red zone. But Lily, he pictured her face, those terrified eyes. He pushed harder. The promise to his fallen friend, Jimmy, echoed in his mind. Live a life worthy of our sacrifice, Mac. Don't waste it. Wasting it would be to fail here, to give in to the pain, to the exhaustion. The crowd on the shore was a blur, their faces indistinct, their sounds muted by the water in his ears and the roaring of his own blood. He was in a tunnel, a desperate, watery passage with only one exit. Lily, he felt a flicker of despair, a cold tendril of doubt. Could he do this? Was it already too late? He crushed it. He would not fail. Not again. Not like with that little girl in the village. The thought fueled a fresh surge of adrenaline, a desperate burst of power. Then, Through the clouded water, a fleeting glimpse of dark fabric, a pale limb. She was sinking, drifting deeper. He was almost on top of her. It was now, with a final, convulsive lunge, born of sheer, unadulterated will, his right hand shot out. His fingers brushed something soft, then snagged, then closed around a thin, fragile arm. He had her. The jolt of contact, the slight weight in his grasp, sent a shockwave of fierce, desperate triumph through him. But there was no time for relief. He pulled, hauling Lily's terrifyingly limp form towards him, up through the water column. Her head broke the surface, lolling unnaturally. Her face was a ghastly white, her lips tinged blue. For one heart-stopping moment, he saw no life, no flicker, then a tiny, shuddering cough. Water trickled from her mouth. She was alive. Barely. He wrapped his left arm around her small chest, tucking her securely against his side, her head resting in the crook of his shoulder, trying to keep her face clear of the choppy surface. The task now was to get them both back. And it was, he realized with a fresh wave of dawning horror, even harder than getting out to her. He was spent. His arms were trembling, his muscles screaming, his energy reserves utterly depleted. Lily was a dead weight, small but significant. The current seemed to sense his weakness, pushing against him with renewed force. He turned a monumental effort and began the agonizing journey back. Each stroke was torture. His vision grayed out, then returned in patches. He fought for every breath, the air rasping in his throat. He focused on a single point on the shore, a bright yellow umbrella, and aimed for it one desperate, burning pull at a time. He could hear shouting closer now. He thought he heard Duke barking, a frantic, urgent sound. He just needed to keep going. One more stroke. Just one more. Suddenly, a splash beside him. A young man, maybe late teens, his face pale but set with a desperate courage Mac recognized, was wading towards him. "Here, let me help," the boy gasped, his voice cracking. He reached for Lily, carefully taking some of her weight. Another splash, and a larger man, his face grim with determination, was there too, grabbing Mac under the arm. "We've got you, mate. We've got you." The relief was so immense it almost buckled Mac. He felt their strength augmenting his own fading power, and together, the three of them battled the last few yards to the muddy shallows. Hands reached down, dozens of them, it seemed. Lily was lifted gently from his grasp, passed from one pair of urgent hands to another until she was laid on the grass. Mac was hauled unceremoniously onto bank, collapsing onto the mud like a landed fish, his chest heaving, every fiber of his being screaming for rest. He lay there, gasping, the world a dizzying whirl of sound and light. Then, the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. Lily, coughing violently, then crying, a thin, weak, but unmistakably vital wail. Her mother, a whirlwind of yellow dress and flying hair, was beside her instantly, collapsing to her knees, gathering her daughter into a fierce embrace. "Lily! Oh, my God, Lily! My baby, you're breathing. You're okay." Her sobs were no longer despair, but an explosive, overwhelming joy and relief that washed over the entire scene. The stunned silence that had gripped the onlookers fractured. A single, hesitant clap, then another, and then it was as if a dam had burst. A roar of applause, of cheers, of shouts of bravo, and he did it, swept across the park. People surged forward, their earlier paralysis replaced by an urgent need to help, to connect, to witness. Strangers hugged each other, tears streaming down their faces. The air thrummed with a potent cocktail of adrenaline, relief, and profound, shared humanity. Someone gently placed a towel over Mac's shaking shoulders. Another pressed a bottle of water to his lips. He managed a weak sip. He looked up through mud-caked eyelashes into a sea of faces. The expressions were ones he rarely encountered, raw admiration, deep respect, and an almost reverent awe. The pity he so often endured was gone, incinerated in the heat of his incredible act. Lily's mother, her face streaked with tears and dirt, approached him. She sank to her knees in the mud beside him, oblivious. She took his scraped, trembling hand, her grip surprisingly strong. I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice hoarse. You saved my little girl. You saved her. You're a hero." She brought his hand to her cheek, her tears falling onto his skin. "Thank you. From the bottom of my heart. Thank you." Mac, still fighting for breath, could only nod, a lump forming in his own throat. A uniformed paramedic, his movements calm and efficient, was already kneeling beside Lily, checking her vitals. She was crying lustily now, a good sign. He then turned to Mac. "Sir, that was the bravest damn thing I've ever seen. We need to get you checked out right away. You push yourself far beyond any normal limit." He shook his head, a look of utter disbelief on his face. Truly incredible. As two men carefully lifted Mac, supporting his exhausted body, and helped him towards his wheelchair, which Duke was now guarding with quiet intensity, the crowd parted spontaneously, creating a pathway. Their applause had subsided into a respectful, awed silence. They watched him, this quiet, unassuming man who had just redefined courage before their very eyes. He wasn't just a disabled veteran anymore. He was a titan. The news crews arrived eventually, as they always do. Miracle at Lake Harmony. Legless hero saves drowning child. Mac deflected the attention. The request for interviews. The word hero felt ill-fitting, like a uniform that was too large. He was a soldier. He'd seen someone in peril, and he'd acted. It was the code he lived by. The only thanks he needed was the sight of Lily, a few days later, walking hand in hand with her parents towards a small house, a shy smile on her face, and a crayon drawing of a man with very strong arms pulling a girl from a very blue lake clutched in her hand. Her whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Mac," was a medal more precious than any he'd ever earned. In the quiet weeks that followed, Mac noticed a change within himself. The phantom pains hadn't vanished. They were his lifelong companions, but their sharp edges seemed softer. The stone of regret in his gut felt lighter. He had met a ghost from his past in the waters of Lake Harmony, the ghost of helplessness, and he had vanquished it. He had not only saved Lily, he had saved a piece of himself he thought long dead. The people of Lake Harmony saw him differently, too. The awkward glances were replaced by nods of respect, by smiles, by offers to share a coffee. He was still Mac O'Connell, the man in the wheelchair, but now they saw the ranger, the protector, the embodiment of a quiet, steely courage. He still visited the lake with Duke, finding solace beneath his favorite maple. He knew that true strength wasn't measured in limbs, but in heart. It was in a refusal to surrender, the grit to push on when every fiber of your being screamed to stop. It was a spirit of sacrifice, of duty, of looking out for your fellow citizen, a spirit that burned brightly in the quiet corners of America, in everyday people who, when the moment demanded, could rise to become extraordinary. Mac O'Connell had simply reminded them all the heroes walk, and sometimes crawl, among us, their courage a shining beacon of the unbreakable American will. And the water of Lake Harmony, once a place of near tragedy, now seemed to reflect a deeper, more hopeful blue.